Before we jump into today's show, I've got a really exciting announcement to make. The autumn cohorts for Start Your Podcast group program are now open. There are 5 dates between September and October, and it's a 6-week program that will get you launched before Christmas. So if podcasting was on your to-do list this year, if you really want to get your podcast up and done by the end of 2023, then come and join me for one of those cohorts and let's make it happen. I have a free masterclass available for you called Understanding the Power of Podcasting. You can go over to donnaeade.com/masterclass, watch the masterclass and get access to that enrollment. I hope to see you in one of the autumn cohorts very soon. That's donnaeade.com/masterclass. Let's get back to the show. You're listening to the Wedding Procast UK. My name's Donna. I'm your host and the founder of the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors. Today we have on the podcast a great couple, Jude and Chris Wharton, co-founders of Ready Steady Websites, an off-the-shelf website and membership site template service. They launched Ready Steady Websites in 2019, have been running a successful digital design company, Second Floor Designs Limited, since 2010. They are a husband and wife team, and we are going to get into that and so much more about websites in today's episode. Let's jump in. To the podcast, everybody. It is so good to have you listening today because I have not one but 2 experts to interview today, and they are sharing with us some great tips for your website. So we have Jude and Chris Wharton of Ready Steady Websites. Hi guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Hi.
So these two are a husband-wife couple that work together. So I am going to let them take the mic for a moment and introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about their business. Go for it, guys.
Okay, so as Donna said, we created Ready Steady Websites, which is an off-the-shelf website and membership site template service aimed primarily at small business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches and speakers. But we do have a range of templates and it can be used by a range of different businesses and organizations. And we created this service about 2 years ago now in 2019. But before that, we already had our more traditional small web agency business called Second Floor Designs Limited, which we founded in 2010. Before that, Chris worked in the web industry, and I come from a background of training development and people and project management.
Yes.
Do you want to say a bit about your web industry experience?
Yeah, so before we set up Second Floor, I worked for about 10 years-ish in various kind of design roles, and then I ended up managing a studio, and we worked with massive corporates like IBS and Coots and IKEA and Aston Martin, those kind of people. And then when Jude got pregnant with our first son, we decided I didn't want to be working at 5 a.m. until midnight, so we went for it and set up our own kind of agency, really, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then it's kind of grown, and yes, Ready Steady Websites is kind of the new thing, the new service that we found a kind of gap in the market for, really.
Yeah, we realised that we had a lot of entrepreneurs starting to come to us for very similar websites who didn't really have the budget to go full bespoke, but pushed themselves to do it because they wanted something that looked truly professional and they wanted the support from someone who knew what they were doing. And that's when we realised that Ready Steady Websites needed to exist. There needed to be this middle ground between the completely do it for you and then the completely do it yourself, really, and having that template service where they can do a lot of the stuff themselves, but we're there to support them and they can use our tutorials to help them with the process. And so, yeah, that's why we created Ready Steady Websites.
That's very cool. And I love that, you know, as a dad, you were like, do you know what? This is not the lifestyle I want for my children to just sort of see me at the weekends and bar that, like, fly by night. If you're lucky, you might get a kiss goodnight before we go to bed. So I love that you made that decision as a family. I think that's really cool. So one of the things that I wanted to sort of talk to you and take advantage of the fact that I've got both of you here is I know a lot of wedding vendors and suppliers actually do have this husband-wife partnership in their business, whether that be as photographers or filmmakers. I see it a lot in those areas, but I know other areas too that, you know, do have that dual working and home relationship. And so while I've got you here, I just got to take advantage of it and so ask you, like, what is the biggest challenge that you two have working together and living together? I mean, I know we've all been stuck at home with each other since March, so this possibly something that even if you don't work together, you're finding that you struggled with for the last 12 months.
I think we did struggle right at the beginning to just balance out like the different dynamics within the relationships, didn't we? Like, we would find that we were sort of sniping at each other in the business because of like perhaps trying to balance too much stuff with the home stuff, and there wasn't enough separation between the two, and it did make things really quite difficult. But we then went and got an actual office in the centre of town near where we lived, and then having that actual going to work, that separation, that going and traveling to an actual place of work really changed things. Then everything just seemed to click, and it was like, right, now we're at work now and we're professional and we're going to talk about the work stuff, and we're not going to worry about like the stress of the childcare and who's dropping who off and this, that and the other. We're now at work and we can focus, and that made things a lot easier. Now we're not in an office, obviously. And actually, we took the decision to give up our office after we'd been in lockdown for the first few months. Well, but not just lockdown, because I'm higher risk, I was shielding. And so we didn't want to go back to the office anyway, because although it's our own office, we're in a shared building. So we took the decision to get rid of the office for a while. And, you know, once we all go back to normal, we'll decide what we do then. But actually, we're fine now. I think we've just got to that point where we understand how we both work. We can separate it from the home life. We still have conversations far too late into the evening about work. There are still nights where, and it's not just us, we'll find ourselves sending messages to people that we are sort of business partners with in different areas of our business, and all three of us are chatting to like 11 o'clock and thinking, what are we doing? But it does work better. And I think the key thing was understanding how each other works. The problem is we both were managers in our last jobs before we set up the business ourselves, so we weren't very used to like not being in charge, just us. So I think that was a thing to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. It was a weird kind of dynamic at the beginning, and it did help that when we got our first office, we shared it with someone else, so we couldn't continue the kind of home silliness in front of the other guy who was working there. So that worked quite well. And then when we moved offices, he went to his own office, and then we've been working in the same office for each other, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years maybe. But yeah, coming back home, it seemed to just worked out fine. But yeah, like Jude said, we do spend some, like the other night we went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning because we were chatting about business stuff and Clubhouse and those kind of things. So it does all
Clubhouse, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, Clubhouse was definitely to blame for that one. But yes, yeah, but it's still, even when we do that now, we're fine with it. It's still fine, whereas in the past it wasn't. But it was really only the first 6 months. I'd say there was a rocky 6 months of thinking we've gone all in on this. Like, we've both given up really well-paid jobs. We've got to make this work. And there was probably that stress and that worry there as well that impacted on how we were. But once we could see it was going to work, and once we settled into our working pattern, managed to separate the home life from the work life, it works now. And yeah, people are sometimes surprised that we can cope with doing everything together all the time, but we manage it, and yeah, it's fine.
I think it's a true testament to how good a relationship is if you can actually survive working together and living together as a constant thing. It's definitely something to be proud of, because there are plenty of people that can't do it, and I always wonder, if you can't do that, then should you be together? Like, if you can't be with each other all the time, I mean, you're supposed to be like your best friend. You get married to your best friend, the person that you love and you cherish and you want to be with them. Like, if you can't do 24/7 with them, is there something wrong there? But that is something for a completely different show.
We're not relationship experts. That's probably a different podcast.
Yeah, entirely different podcast, yeah. It'd be interesting to know the answer though. So for those of us that have been sort of stuck at home for the last 12 months, maybe we have been through that rocky period and we've come out the other side with our partners. But maybe there are people that are looking at maybe when they go, when things go back to normal, actually they don't want to go back to the job that they had before, and they're looking at setting up in the wedding industry. Maybe their wife already works in the wedding industry and husband's going to come and work with her, or vice versa, and they actually want to do it that way. What's one of your sort of top tips as a couple that you think people starting out doing that need to consider and need to sort of get in place to make sure that, you know, it's as smooth as possible?
I think making sure that you have equal roles and you both understand how important each other's role is in the business. That's one thing I'd say. The other thing I would say as well is ignore what anyone else is saying about how they perceive your roles in the business, because I have found so much, because I'm the woman in the business, the amount of comments of, oh, are you still working for Chris? Are you still helping Chris out in the business? I think because as well, it came at the time when we had our first child. So although the business was set up, the two of us, it was always a 50-50 shareholder. We set it up all together. Chris essentially initially started it because I had a baby and literally first child. Obviously, I then took some maternity leave. And so it was Chris running everything to start off with. But because I suppose there was probably 9 months before then I properly jumped in with 2 feet and was like properly in the business as well. That was people's perception, absolutely. And then as the children got older, I was doing more and more, and now we're absolutely both full-time in the business, apart from juggling homeschooling. But, you know, apart from that at the moment, as full-time as we can be, and we are absolutely 50-50 doing different sides of things, but there's still that perception. And I just have to ignore it, because I know that I am doing as much as Chris, but in the different sides of the business, different ways of working. But yeah, I just think they're the key things. Just be really clear about your roles and ignore if anyone else is saying anything that might be putting one of you down a bit.
And that was family, friends, colleagues, and also women saying that about Jude as well, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, I think Jude's kind of hit it on the head there, really. That's one of the things we like about the new business Ready Steady websites, because we set it up together and it's a joint thing. It felt like a joint thing from the beginning.
Yeah.
Whereas Second Floor, I was kind of doing a lot of freelancey kind of white label work at the beginning, and then it kind of turned into an agency, and it just felt a bit more mine at the beginning, but now everything feels 50-50. So yeah, Jude's right. The mindset thing's really difficult, because you're always thinking, am I good enough? The whole imposter syndrome, you know, you've got the whole kind of fear of missing out thing. If you think other people are doing better than you, it's kind of, it's quite, you have to have a strong head, basically.
And I think what you need to try and do as well is, when Chris is having a moment of, quite often with Chris it's, have we chosen the right tech to do this? This tech looks like it's doing better. Is that going to overtake us in the market? And he'll go down that sort of rabbit hole, worrying of mindset. Mine will be different in a, oh, we're not getting our marketing out there. You know, people who we know aren't as good as us really in this industry seem to be getting their voices heard better, and and I'll go down that one. What we find is really important is we can't both do that at the same time. So if Chris is having have we made the right choice here, I need to be the one going, yes, we looked at it all, we made the choice, we know we do this really well, and I'll pull him up. And then when I go down my little rabbit hole, he will pull me up. And it always seems to work that we're not both going down into the pits of despair at the same time. And I think that's a real good thing about having a business partner, whether you're married to them or not. If you've got a business partner and you can like buoy each other up and make each other feel better and make each other see sense and realize that it is all good and you can carry on, that's a really key thing to do, I think.
Yeah, the other thing I'd probably add is just be patient. So be patient with each other, and be patient with getting clients, be patient with growing the business. You know, these things are a long game. You're not going to be flooded with clients in the next 6 days or even 6 months. You know, it can take longer. And we found that with our business and other things we've done, it just takes a while to build up the kind of momentum. And then you hit a point where you think, oh, actually, this is working now. And you just need to keep going until you hit that point, really.
Yeah, that's and so I'm good. Not patient at all. Chris isn't that patient, but he's more patient than me at least. So we do have to work really hard on that area of things. But yeah, it does pay off when you can be patient and just trust that it's going to get there and you're doing the right thing.
I think that's so good. And I really want to sort of just hone in on what you said there about not listening to other people's perceptions of your role in the business, because I think that can lead to that snippiness that you were talking about. Like if somebody's telling you, oh, are you still working for your husband, or are you still helping him out, that makes you feel less than. And then when Chris would maybe ask you, oh, Jude, could you do, you just like, I'm equal partners here, and it could get really frustrating that you feel like it's then coming from both sides, where of course he's not feeling that way towards you at all. So I think it's really, really important, and those are really good lines to sort of draw, like what are our roles, who's doing what, and not getting in each other's way when you're doing that, and being mindful of not encroaching on each other's projects and space and what you're doing. I think that was really good. I hope that helps, guys, because I thought that was really, really good tips there. Now I wanted to move on to obviously what you guys are expert at, and that is the website side of things. So I was looking at you guys giving us sort of 3 or 4 things that you think would be really, really important for people to focus on. Obviously the wedding industry been pretty much at a standstill for the last 11 months now, and people have got a bit of time to sort of work on making sure that their websites are doing what they need them to do. And so obviously coming out of the gate, when we get the go ahead, there's probably going to be quite a rush of brides on the internet looking for their vendors, trying to find the best. How should people be using their website, and what things can they do on their website to make them stand out and to make the best use of a website?
So I think the absolute first key thing is really nailing your homepage. Your homepage has to be absolutely spot on. Obviously, it's the page that people are most likely to be hitting first. They may not. If they're finding on a Google search, it may be sending them off to a specific product or service. But on the whole, they're going to be hitting your homepage first. So the key things you want on your homepage are to have a really, really good overarching statement at the top of it, above the fold, as we call it, so before they scroll, that really shows what you do and draws them in. So it shows how you can help them. You want a really, really lovely image up there as well, alongside that or behind that. In the wedding industry, I feel that good images should be easy to come by. Partner up with a local photographer to give you a nice image that's relevant to your role in the wedding industry, and have some really, really clear call to action buttons on the top of that homepage as well. So that's whether that's how they can get in contact with you, like a get in touch button, whether that's download my free guide, my free wedding planning guide, or whatever it is, something that's going to be really useful to those couples getting married that can get their email address on your list, something like that. They all need to be above the fold before they scroll on the homepage to really draw them in, to capture their details, get them on your list, get them interested. So that's one of my top tips to really make that top part of your homepage really, really solid.
Yeah, I mean, Jude says that's one of her top tips, but actually, if you break those down, there's like 4 or 5 tips in there.
I like to give,
So, just breaking that down slightly, the homepage is very important. You need a message and an image that's perfectly on point to your client avatar or your ideal client. The idea of having a call to action is that they'll fire through to do the main thing on your site, whether that's getting in contact with you, whether that's buying a package. And then you really should have a secondary call to action as well. So it's a kind of like marry me or go on the first date kind of scenario.
Which is a very appropriate analogy in this industry. The analogy actually comes from Donald Miller, who is a marketing expert. He's got a book, Building a Story Brand. Brand. Brilliant book. But yeah, he does use the marry me second date analogy. Yes.
So yeah, the marry me is the kind of like buy my thing, and the second date is like, okay, you don't want to buy my thing, but how about have a freebie? So at least you've got their email address and they're on your sort of list, and you can contact them. In terms of kind of the fold, it's very important. So if it's on a laptop, it's on a tablet, or if it's on a mobile, you should be getting that key information and the call to action before someone interacts with the screen. That's really important.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't think about doing that on a mobile. A lot of people make sure it all looks good on the computer, and then when you go to the mobile you can see sort of half of that first image and statement, and then you can't see anything else. It needs to all be before they scroll on a mobile device as well, and that is key. So that's kind of one tip, although it's about 3. Another tip would be absolutely test your website on a mobile. More than 50% of web browsing is done on mobile devices now. In fact, more than 50% of web browsing on average is done actually on mobile phones now. Then there's more again that are done on a tablet. So the percentage that's done on a mobile device in total is far more than is done on a computer now. So you really, really need to go and check everything works well and looks good on a mobile phone on your website. Make sure you haven't got titles vanishing off the side. Make sure you haven't got contact forms that don't fit on the page. Make sure you haven't got pop-ups that stop people from clicking on them and getting out, because I know that's one of your bugbears as well, Donna. Yes, we've had this conversation before.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, that is really key, to make sure that everything is working really, really well on a mobile. Do you want to give another one?
The other thing I'd say is your top navigation, so your kind of menu should be clear and consistent. So don't use any terminology in there that is maybe industry specific that kind of the standard person won't understand. Make sure you have something that's clear, and there's a clear contact touch point in there as well. So quite often we'll kind of say, well, make your contact link look like a button, because at least you're going to capture someone there. And then the color usage of your kind of main call to action should be the same color throughout the site. So they say, for example, they see a green button or a pink button. Every time they see that pink button, it goes to the same place. You're building that kind of consistent message across the site.
Yeah, you've got at least 3 tips in there.
Yeah, that's fantastic, actually, because I feel like one of the things that I see a lot of people do on websites that I think isn't great, and I'm hoping you're going to agree with this, is when they come up with something really obscure to call their about page, and it just like, what on earth does that even mean?
Yeah, we completely agree. Not only do people not know what it means, so they might not go through, and it's not just the about page. Blogs is another one that people try and come up with some kind of clever title for, but often it's not one word. So if you think about your top menu, your top navigation on your website, you've already probably got about sort of 6 to 8 words on there, even if you've got all your pages named with a single word. Then you start making things clever and amusing to yourself, maybe not to anyone else, and they go to sort of 3 or 4 words long from the menu for the name of the page, so that's on the menu. Then your menu's getting really cluttered, and like Chris said, it needs to be clear, it needs to be really obvious. When search engines are looking at your site, they're going to be picking up on the titles of the page names, and they're going to reference about and home and that kind of thing more than meet the warrior king or whatever you've decided to call your about page. That's unlikely in the wedding industry, but you know what I mean.
Wedding warriors.
Yeah. Meet the wedding warriors. So about is much better.
Yeah, so another kind of mini tip on your top menus, really you should limit it to have 6 to 8 items on there. If you get any more than that, it gets cluttered and people don't know where to look. So when someone's hits your website, the first thing they do is they look top left, so they normally pick up the kind of logo and the branding. Then they see the first couple of menu items, and then they go straight to the right, and then they go back again and read them again, and then they come down in a diagonal left to right across the page. So that's important that you have got a call to action top right, which is really important, and then your key message is on that diagonal as well, because it's the first thing they're probably actually going to read. So yeah, it's really important.
And the other thing that I wanted to point out to the listeners, and this is something that I have been banging on about for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's something that I'm very, very passionate about, and it comes from being a wedding photographer for 10 years and things that I saw going on in the industry that I didn't like, hence the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors. And that is, if you are a wedding photographer especially, but for me, if you are involved in the wedding industry and you have images on your website, they should be images of your work, not stock images. Now, I know there are plenty of stock images out there, and I have stock images on my site because I'm not providing the wedding services, and it's just, I don't have certain images in my portfolio. I've got a mix on my website of my personal photography images and stock images. But if you are somebody who does wedding stationery and you have these beautiful flat lays of gorgeous layouts, there's some beautiful flat lays on stock imagery, and somebody's going to assume that you can do that. And if you can't do that, then that's kind of false advertising. And if you are a photographer and you use somebody else's images on your website, which I just think is an insanely big no-no, people expect that level of service from you. And if you can't provide that, you are mis-selling yourself. So in the wedding industry, especially, I think it is so, so important that the images on your site represent the work that you do. So get in contact with the wedding photographers that have shot the weddings that you've been part of and ask them for images. You know, I've always said photographers are pretty bad at getting back to people, but keep on at them and ask them for them, because it is so much better to have images that belong to what you do than to use stock imagery. Absolutely. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, but you're not the first person we've heard say that. So we run challenges sometimes to help people plan their websites. And we had someone on the challenge from the wedding industry, didn't she? She set up venues. So she dressed venues, had all the lovely chair covers and all that kind of thing. And someone else had set up in her area also offering a similar service, and she knew that they were using stock photos, and the way that the photos were being placed on their website, there was no mention of, you know, this isn't how we have created a room, this isn't what we've done. And it absolutely looked like that is how they dressed rooms. And yeah, it made her obviously quite upset, because it's a competitor who almost was showing themselves off better, but they've literally just started and obviously probably haven't dressed many venues and didn't have the photos. So I think that's really key. And I think if you are new, I understand it's really hard because if you haven't got the photos yet, but I figure, you know, if you're new, hire a hall for a day and dress it up in 3 different ways, as if you've done 3 different weddings, and get a professional photographer along to take the photos. They may even do it for free or at a reduced rate if you are then advertising their photography services on your website. But yeah, I think it's really important that, you know, the images are showing you off to be genuine, in a genuine way, because I think it will come back to bite you if not, because they'll still, like you said, if you've got putting out some stationery photos and you don't provide that quality of stationery, you're not going to get any word of mouth referrals or anything like that if you haven't provided what they thought you were going to provide. So yeah, I think yes, you're in dodgy ground there if you're portraying that as your own work.
For sure. And there are ways around it. I mean, you can put, this is an example of the type of work that I do, but you've got to allude to that, because otherwise it is really unfair on the couples that are coming to your site, seeing these lovely images and maybe booking you based off of that and your personality. Because, I've always said that for me, the reason I set up the society was because I wanted the couples to be looking at their suppliers and going, I like this person, and not having to worry about the other stuff. Like, if you book through my site, that the vendors on there have got insurance, they've got contracts, they're set up professionally, they abide to a code. So you don't have to worry about that stuff. All you've got to worry about is, do I like this person? And that's what they should be doing. They shouldn't be having to go onto websites and doing reverse image searches to see if those images are really that person's or whether they pop up on Canva. It's not. They're not going to do that. They're just going to assume that because they're on your website that that's your work, and it's really unfair on them. Big point, well made. Okay, guys, so thank you so much for that. Have you got any other big tip that you want to share with us before we close out today?
Oh, we have so many tips. I think one of our key ones is whether you are starting your website from scratch or whether you have a website that you're not happy with and something needs to be done to it, you need to plan it. So many people don't realize the importance of properly planning their website to ensure that, all of their copy flows nicely on each page, so that each page links well to another one. So everything's laid out well, basically, so the user experience of the website visitor is just smooth and plain sailing and reflects the service you're also then going to provide them down the line once they've made contact with you and chosen to use you. So that's one of our biggest tips, that planning your website is just so important.
Yeah, once you've planned it properly, you can get a cohesive experience, like Jude said. And the website really is an extension of you as a brand, whether it's a personal brand or a company brand or whatever you do. Obviously, you can carry that across to Facebook and Instagram, those kind of places, but you can really control how your brand looks and how you get your message across on your website. So it's very important to kind of have that cohesive experience. And once you've done the planning, it kind of sounds a bit boring doing the planning. Oh, I've got to do research, I've got to plan out the pages. But actually, once you've done it, it's easy then. You can just chuck all the content in there, chuck all the images in there. And then our final tip really is iteration is key. So a lot of people put their website up and it's like a painting. Oh, I don't need to touch that again. But actually, you need to keep going back to it. You need to keep iterating it. Your audience changes, your message changes, your packages change. You need to make sure it's up to date and kept up to date.
Yeah, absolutely. And just even if things aren't changing in a big way with your audience or your packages, making sure you're putting new content on there is a really good idea. Each time you get a new testimonial, add it, because it might be that someone visited your website once, they came back a couple of weeks later, then they've noticed that there's a new testimonial there that wasn't last time. And that's like, oh, okay, that's new, that's current. They're still they're really working on their business. That just elevates you in their mind. And, if you like to write regular blogs and things like that, just getting new content on the site is a really, really good thing to do as well.
I love that. That is such a good tip, because I know that I've got some people in my membership and some people that listen that haven't got a blog. And, I am hammering on to them about getting some weekly content that they put on their website because it's so good for SEO purposes. But even if it is just updating your testimonials, that simple thing of changing something on your website is going to ping out to Google, and it makes it more interesting. Like how many times do you go to somebody's website and you look at their about page and it's exactly the same as it was the first time you looked at it? People change, your interests change, your hobbies change, things your children's ages change. Oh, the number of times that I read, oh, my child's 6 and I've seen pictures of their 17th birthday or something on Instagram. I'm like, seriously, guys, update it. But yeah, those simple things. And I think testimonials is a really good one, because I think people do, they initially ask for those key testimonials, like 5 testimonials to put on my website, and then they put them on and they think jobs are good and I'm done. But actually, that ability to be able to go in and sort of take the oldest one off and put a new one on and keep that as a constantly changing thing is a good thing if people are going to come back to you. And it is, something that couples will do. They will research vendors and then they will go back and look at them again and see. And brides are notorious for it, especially with photographers. I want to see that gallery again, let me see those photos again. If there's something new on the website, then it shows that you're still working, it shows that you're active, and it shows that you've got people that are working with you currently. It's like, otherwise it's like, oh yeah, these people you worked with like 3 years ago, but nobody since then has had anything nice to say about you.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's key, and especially with photography. Yeah, you need to be updating that gallery, that portfolio all the time. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, guys. It's been really good, and I've found some really interesting tips for myself. So for people listening, if they are looking at, tackling their website during the remainder of lockdown and looking at what we can do to improve it, how can they get in touch with you guys?
It's quite easy. We're basically Ready Steady websites everywhere. So our website is readysteadywebsites.com, and there are some free resources on there which might be useful for people if they do just want to do a bit of tweaking to their site. But also, obviously, you can look at our templates and our whole service. We're on Facebook as Ready Steady Websites. We're on Instagram as Ready Steady Websites. So we are quite easy to find.
I was going to say, do you see this, guys? They are walking their talk.
Yeah, it's an extension of the brand wherever you go. And on both Facebook and Instagram, we do some tips during the week, and we do a weekly Facebook Live with some tips. And so, yeah, we're good to follow if you do want to kind of keep up with what you should be doing with your website, or even if you're considering a membership as well. We do membership sites too and talk about those as well. So that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So guys, all of those details will be in the show notes, and you'll be able to link straight through to Jude and Chris and get in touch. So until next week, bye for now. Don't forget to hit those stars and leave a review of the podcast where you listen if you found value in what you heard today. It's a free way you can help the podcast reach more people just like you.